Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Lethal Sheriff here once again, reading more into the killer's backstories. This is part 4. I know I've kind of put them off for a long time. I had a bit of a holiday, got COVID, and I've had a lot of other stuff happen, but it's glad to be jumping back into this, because I really want to finish these killers off as quick as I can, especially with the new killer coming out. And yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what his backstory is like and what his abilities are. So here we've got the pig, so let's dive on in. So when John Kramer, better known as Jigsaw, planned for his son to be born during the Chinese Zodiac's Year of the Pig, he wanted it to represent fertility and rebirth, a new beginning for him and his wife, and the start of a charmed life for his son. But that plan was shattered on the night that a junkie broke into his wife's clinic hoping to score. After this event resulted in the death of his unborn son, John finally caught up with the junkie, making him his first test subject, and the pig was changed forever too. It became a representation of the disease that was rotting John Kramer from the inside. A reminder that we are just meat unless we elevate ourselves through our actions by grasping life for the jaws of death. Oops. The pig became a vessel, an agent of Jigsaw, conveying the subjects to their test. For some of those who emerged victorious, the pig could still be a rebirth into their new lives as apprentices, even disciples of Jigsaw. That was the case for Amanda Young, a troubled soul whose life had been a catalogue of harm, both to herself and those around her. That changed when she faced and bested Jigsaw's test. Deciding her life was worth something, she became devoted to Jigsaw's cause, ready to take over when the cancer consumed him. But she became more dependent on John, her anguish at his impending death combining with a belief that their test subjects weren't capable of saving themselves, of being reborn in the crucible of their games. Seeing this, John presented her with another game, another chance to save herself, but Amanda let her rage and jealousy rule her actions. She failed the test and took a bullet as a consequence. Bleeding out on the tiled floor, darkness engulfed Amanda's vision, accompanied by a sound like creaking wood. Then she was in a forest, once more viewing the world through the eyes of a pig. Trees surrounded her, their branches clawing at her from all sides. Waves of panic washed over her, and she could hear her breath reverberating inside the mask. Had she been damned, cursed to spend her days here in this gauze? Or maybe this was another test. Maybe she hadn't failed at all. John always fought one step ahead of everyone else, planned for every eventuality, and he would never give up on her, surely. Jigsaw may have gone, but he had passed her on to another, a being for whom she would be the pig again. Ultimately, she saw now that she had been right in the choices she had made. The time for games was over. There was no chance of redemption for any of them. They were meat, and meat was destined for slaughter. So, yeah, wow. I obviously haven't seen much of Jigsaw movies. I've seen some of the other horror movies, but who knows? I should probably jump in and watch some of them. They sound very interesting. Right, on to our next killer. The clown. Obviously a lot of people are afraid of clowns. I can see why. This one is no excuse. Anyway, let's jump on in. Kenneth Chase was born in 1932 by a difficult labour which his mother wouldn't survive. This event drove a rift between him and his father that never closed. As the boy grew, so did his father's resentment and his drinking habit. By the time Kenneth was at school, they lived mostly separate lives. Academically, he was unremarkable, coasting by on his significant athletic prowess. He grew tall and strong, excellent at tracks events, but shunned any attempts to coax him into team sports. On his walk home from school, he would often find feathers in the ground, and he soon began a collection, keeping them in a cigar box under his bed. with his father either at work or in an alcoholic-induced stupor. Kenneth had hours to spend alone, transfixed by the regularity of the feathers, barbs, and feeling the softness as he ran them over his lips. Watching the birds that came to the feeder in his garden, he imagined how soft they must be and resolved to catch one. He ingratiated himself with a local dentist, sorry about my pronouncing, soon procuring some anesthetic. Using this, he rigged up a trap on the feeder that he hoped would knock out a bird long enough that he could touch it. After a few failed attempts, he managed to trap a robin. As it lay in his hands, he felt a sudden rush of a life at his mercy. He planned to release it once it recovered from the anesthetic. Instead, as its eyes flickered back into consciousness and it began to struggle, his grip remained firm. His fingers slowly tightened around its throat, squeezing onto its chest. Feathers were funny still. He disposed of the body, keeping just a feather, with which he started a new collection, discarding the others as fake. By the late 1940s, Kenneth had left school and started working as a bush boy at a local diner. He had also escalated to larger prey like squirrels, raccoons and dogs, becoming skilled at customizing the anesthetic dosage for each. In early 1954, a young man went missing, and the town was turned upside down in the search. A few months later, Kenneth's father, while doing some work in the crawlspace under the house, found a cigar box. He broke it open and saw to his horror that it contained feathers, animal paws, and a man's finger. Returning from work, Kenneth saw his father leaving the crawl space with a cigar box in his hands. He turned on his heel and never went home again. After a few weeks of living rough, he encountered a travelling circus, and with his prodigious strength was hired to work on the ropes. He assumed a new name, Jeffrey Hawk. Suddenly surrounded by a close-knit community, Jeffrey had to learn to socialize. He donned a new personality like a disguise, but quickly becoming known as charming and helpful, and was welcomed into his family. Over the next decade, he stayed with the circus, traveling the length and breadth of the USA, but with their itinerant life providing few repercussions, he fell into bad habits: drink, junk food, drugs. He indulged all of them to excess. For a time these vices were enough, but then his old urges returned, and his nomadic existence became a cover for him to resume killing. He stole clothes and makeup from perfumers, fashioning a disguise that would let him get close to his victims before he anesthetized them, bringing them back to his caravan where they would awake to find themselves bound and at his mercy. He would finally get to have his fun, mentally and physically torturing them, their screams fueling him before being lost in the night. Once their strength was at its lowest, he would carefully examine their fingers, searching for the prettiest, running them over his tongue to find the tastiest. Ugh, yuck. Once he found the best, he would cut it from their hand and proudly add it to his collection, disposing of the rest of the body as pointless waste. Men, young, woman, young, old, he didn't care. The essence of a good collection is in the variety, and the memories and stories they evoke. He removed the costumes less and less, shedding his old personality with it, fully embracing the clown, his true self. With time he became complacent and sloppy. A victim managed to work free of her bindings while he was steeping off the drink. She escaped, screaming for help, and he awoke to find the rest of the circus bearing down on him. He whipped his horse and the caravan and disappeared into the night. Since then he has roamed the country, a parasite who would always be found at a carnival or a circus, but who had never been seen on any playbill. He lured those brave or foolish enough to come near, trapped them, and moved on before they could be found missing. Somewhere along the way, he left the ordinary roads of the USA behind him, travelling through a veil of mist and entering a new realm. It was a place of transcendence and impermanence, perfectly suiting the life he had chosen to lead. Feeling more at home than he had in his entire life, he set up camp and waited for his first visitor. It seems like the clown's backstory and especially his actions, kind of reminds me of Michael Myers. I don't know if you've seen some of the movies where Michael Myers would kill dogs, but it kind of is similar. The clown started off killing birds, dogs, cats, and then humans, and then same with Michael Myers, killed dogs and then eventually humans as well. So they kind of both got the same storyline. But yeah, it's a gruesome story. But I mean, he's kind of fun to play as, but still creepy. Anyway, moving on. Here we have the spirit. Let's dive on in. See how long this story is. We could probably do one more killer if I can. Rin was the only child of the Yomoka family. She was raised in the dusty halls of a traditional house in Kagawa. She studied education at Takamatusa, I think that's how you say it, Takamatus, a private university, which weighed heavily on her family's shaky finance. Her mother got ill that year and the bills started piling up. Ren worked part-time in a futile attempt to help tighten the load. Her father faced a debt that grew without end. He started working double shifts in hopes of obtaining a promotion. That's when he started losing sleep. A dark whisper would keep him awake all night, reminding him of his hopeless situation. Exhausted, he started to lose grasp of reality, fighting to deny that what the voice whispered at night. Rin's father made a desperate move. He met with his superior and explained his situation. He begged for a bonus in advance, time of anything. His request was denied. The company had launched a defective production line that was costing them dearly. Someone had to be held accountable, and Rin's father fitted the bill perfectly. He was fired after 22 years of service. That evening, Rin came home from work. She had stayed late to entertain customers that lingered at the restaurant. As she parked her bike in the shed, she heard her mother scream from the house. She rushed in, climbing up the stairs to her parents' room. There she found bits and pieces of her mother on the floor. Her limbs were clean cut, tangled up in an unnatural position. Her breast was sliced up, revealing her ribcage, which was cracked open. Rin gagged. A sharp katana came crashing down. Rin blocked the blade, which bit into her bare forearm. The shock of recognition interrupted her pain. Her father was wielding the katana with a stoic expression. She cried out to make him stop, but he slashed her arm again. She rushed off and slid on the blood-smeared floor, using the doorframe as support. She raised herself up. The katana ripped through the wall, cleaving her other arm. She screamed in pain as she limped into the hallway, only to be met by her father's blade. She stepped back trembling, and she held together the soft, loose flesh of her abdomen. Images of her mother's tangled limbs flashed before her eyes. Rin charged at her father, making him stumble back. He punched her torn abdomen, and she reclined in pain. As she struggled to get back up, he slashed her thigh, making her collapse on the floor. As she crawled towards the stairs, he grabbed her hair and yanked her against a partition. The glass shattered on impact, and she fell through, landing one floor down. She heard footsteps somewhere above her. With effort she moved, worming her way into the sea of broken glass. The shards gnawed at her, ripping her flesh. He had to be stopped. He would not get away with what he had done to her, mother. Coughing up blood, her chin grazed the glass, adding to the bleeding. A low-pitched heartbeat started to ring in her ears. Her body felt so heavy she could no longer move. The ground shook with her father's footsteps. She knew she was not going to make it, but she no longer cared. She would make him pay, in this life or the next. A dark fog slowly veiled her eyes, but it could not subdue her rage. She would not rest, not yet. The darkness whispered, promising blood and revenge. An oath was made, and Rin closed her eyes.